Jensen Rhodes knew the moment he cut through the security seal that something was wrong. The cargo container floating in the debris field shouldn't have had military-grade encryption, and it definitely shouldn't have been emanating a faint blue glow from its seams. 19 years of salvage work had taught him to trust his instincts. Those same instincts were now screaming at him to reseal the container and push it back into the void. But curiosity, his eternal weakness, got the better of him. The container's lid lifted with a pneumatic hiss, releasing a cloud of cryogenic vapor into the hold of his ship, the Wanderlust. As the mist cleared, Jensen found himself staring at something that defied explanation. Inside was a humanoid figure, but one made entirely of what appeared to be living crystal. The being's form was feminine, its surface catching the hold's lights and refracting them in mesmerizing patterns. Its crystalline structure was transparent enough that Jensen could see a core of pure energy pulsing within, a heart of light. Well, he muttered to himself, this isn't the spare parts I was looking for. The crystal being's eyes snapped open, revealing irises that swirled with colors like an aurora. Jensen stumbled backward, his hand instinctively moving to the pistol at his hip, but he stopped when he saw the fear in those alien eyes. Please, the being spoke, its voice resonating like wind through crystal chimes. They'll kill me if they find me. Jensen's hand dropped from his weapon. Who's they? The Helios Syndicate. The name sent a chill down Jensen's spine. The Syndicate wasn't just another criminal organization. They were the ones who wrote the rules that other criminals followed. I am Nisha, the crystal being continued, attempting to stand but stumbling in the container. Jensen caught her reflexively, surprised by how warm she felt despite her crystalline appearance. I am Lumara, the last of my kind who remains free. Jensen helped her steady herself, noting how her crystalline form seemed to flow like liquid glass as she moved. I'm Jensen Rhodes, and you're technically on my ship now, which means whatever trouble you're in is about to become my trouble, isn't it? Nisha's expression shifted, the crystal plates of her face rearranging to show concern. The Syndicate seeks to harvest my people's core energy. They believe it can power weapons beyond anything this galaxy has seen. They're right. A distant ping from the Wanderlust's proximity sensors cut through the conversation. Jensen rushed to the cockpit, Nisha following close behind. The radar showed 3 ships dropping out of hyperspace, Syndicate interceptors based on their signatures. They're tracking me, Nisha said, her voice tight with urgency. The container was broadcasting a signal. I can feel it. Jensen's mind raced through options. The Wanderlust was fast, but it wasn't built for combat. They could run, but the Syndicate would just keep following. They could fight, but that would be suicide. Or they could do something stupid. Hold on to something, Jensen said, sliding into the pilot's seat. His fingers flew across the controls, initiating a sequence that every salvage pilot knew, but none ever wanted to use. What are you doing? Nisha asked, gripping the back of his chair. Breaking the first rule of salvage work, Jensen replied, pulling back on the throttle. Never damage the goods. He spun the ship around and fired the Wanderlust's salvage beam directly at the container they'd just abandoned. The beam caught it, and Jensen used the ship's momentum to swing the container in an arc, releasing it at precisely the right moment to send it hurtling toward the lead Syndicate vessel. The container exploded on impact, its tracking beacon creating a cascade of interference that blinded the pursuer's sensors. Jensen didn't waste the opportunity, punching the Wanderlust into a dive between 2 debris fields and engaging the stealth systems. That was unexpected, Nisha said after they'd put some distance between themselves and the Syndicate ships. Jensen allowed himself a small smile. Yeah, well, I find that the best plans usually are. Want to tell me the rest of the story? Like why the Syndicate is so interested in your people's energy cores. Nisha's crystalline features darkened. Because they discovered that our energy doesn't just power weapons, it can transform them. And now they won't stop until they've harvested every last one of us. Jensen leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his graying hair. "So, what's the plan?" "There is a sanctuary," Nisha said, "a place where the remaining free Lumara have gathered. But I need to warn them. The Syndicate, they're closer to finding it than my people realize. And you trust me with this information because—" Nisha's Aurora eyes met his. "Because you had every reason to hand me over to them, and you didn't. Sometimes trust isn't about choice, it's about necessity." Jensen checked the ship's navigation system. They had enough fuel for one long-range jump. But after that, they'd need to resupply. And every port between here and wherever they were going would be crawling with Syndicate informants. "Well," he said, setting a course for the outer rim, "I always wanted to see how the other half lives. The half that's actually doing something worthwhile instead of just scraping by." Nisha's crystalline form seemed to glow brighter for a moment. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Jensen replied, engaging the hyperdrive. "Something tells me this is just the beginning of our problems." The Wanderlust disappeared into hyperspace, leaving behind the floating wreckage of a container that had held one of the galaxy's most valuable secrets. The hunt was on, and Jensen Rhodes had just made himself a target of the most dangerous organization in known space, all because he couldn't resist looking inside one more container. The Wanderlust drifted in the shadow of a gas giant, its systems running silent. In the dim light of the cockpit, Nisha's crystalline form cast prismatic patterns across the walls. Jensen watched as she traced her fingers over the ship's navigation console, her touch leaving trails of luminescent energy that faded like dying stars. "Your ship," she said. "It's seen much hardship." Jensen raised an eyebrow. "You can tell that by touching it. My people can sense echoes of energy, impressions left behind by years of use and emotion." Her Aurora eyes met his. "This vessel carries many stories of narrow escapes." "Yeah, well, add today to the list." Jensen checked the long-range scanners again. 3 more Syndicate patrols had passed through the system in the last hour. They were getting desperate, or closer to finding them. Neither option was comforting. "You're afraid," Nisha observed. "Damn right I am. The Syndicate doesn't forget, and they definitely don't forgive." He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit from younger days. "But I'm more curious about something. Why were you in that container? Trying to escape?" Nisha's crystalline features darkened, the energy pulse at her core flickering like a troubled heartbeat. "No, I was attempting to infiltrate their main research facility." Her voice carried an edge of bitterness. "My people believe in passive resistance. I believed we needed to act before it was too late. And how'd that work out? They caught me. But not before I learned their true plans." She turned to face him fully, her form shifting like liquid glass. "The Syndicate doesn't just want our energy for weapons. They're trying to synthesize it, to create an artificial version they can mass-produce. Every attempt has failed catastrophically." Jensen's stomach dropped. "How catastrophically are we talking about?" "The failed experiments create ruptures in space-time. Small now, but growing. If they continue—" She left the sentence unfinished. A proximity alert cut through the silence. Jensen's hands flew across the controls, bringing up the tactical display. A massive ship had just dropped out of hyperspace, a Syndicate dreadnought. "That's not a patrol," Jensen muttered. "That's a hunter." Nisha's form tensed, the crystal plates of her body shifting defensively. "Director Raven. Friend of yours. The one who ordered my capture. She leads the Syndicate's research division." Nisha's voice carried a weight Jensen hadn't heard before. "She's different. She doesn't want to weaponize our energy. She wants to become it." The dreadnought scanners swept the system, its beam getting closer to their position. Jensen's mind raced through options. The gas giant's magnetic field would hide them for now, but they couldn't stay here forever. "Tell me about this sanctuary of yours," he said, already plotting potential routes. "Where exactly are we running to?" "It's called the Crystal Veil, hidden in a stellar phenomenon that masks its energy signature." Nisha paused. But we can't go there directly. The syndicate would follow, and I won't lead them to the last free Lumara. Jensen smiled grimly. Good thing I'm not planning to. He fired up the Wanderlust's engines, keeping them at minimal power. Ever heard of the scatter run? Nisha's Aurora eyes widened. The asteroid maze. It's suicide. Only if you don't know the way through. Lucky for us, I used to smuggle medical supplies through there to outer rim colonies. He began the pre-flight sequence. The syndicate's ships are too big to follow, and the magnetic interference will scramble any tracking signals. You're insane, Nisha said, but there was a hint of admiration in her voice. Probably. But I've got a feeling you're not exactly playing it safe either. He glanced at her. Why risk everything to fight back when your people chose to hide? Nisha's core pulsed with a fierce light. Because sometimes survival isn't enough. My people are dying slowly in hiding, while the syndicate grows stronger. Someone had to try something different. The dreadnought scan was almost upon them. Jensen's hands tightened on the controls. Well, different is about to get real interesting. Ready? Nisha settled into the co-pilot's seat, her crystalline form adapting to the chair's shape. With you, I'm beginning to think I should always expect the unexpected. Jensen grinned and pushed the throttle forward. The Wanderlust shot out from behind the gas giant, its engines screaming to life. The dreadnought's massive form turned ponderously to track them, but Jensen was already plotting their course through the deadly maze of the scatter run. As they raced toward the asteroid field, warning shots from the dreadnought lighting up space around them, Jensen realized something. For the first time in years, he wasn't just running from something. He was running towards something that mattered. Director Raven won't stop, Nisha said quietly. She's seen what our energy can do. She's obsessed with its potential. Then we'll just have to disappoint her, Jensen replied, diving the ship between two massive asteroids. Besides, I got a few old friends who owe me favors. Might be time to call them in. The Wanderlust disappeared into the scatter run, leaving the syndicate dreadnought behind. But as they wove through the asteroid maze, both Jensen and Nisha knew this was just another step in a much longer journey. And somewhere out there, Director Raven watched her prey escape, her patience as endless as the void itself. Avon's station hung in space like a tarnished jewel, its ancient solar sails spread wide to catch the light of twin stars. To most travelers, it was just another independent trading post on the edge of civilized space. To Jensen, it was the closest thing to home he'd known in 20 years. Your friend runs this place, Nisha asked as they approached, her crystalline form reflecting the station's running lights. Zara? She doesn't run it so much as creatively manages it. Jensen transmitted their docking codes, ones he hadn't used in years. We used to work together, back when I was running medical supplies to outer colonies. She turned this place into a sanctuary for people who need to disappear. The docking bay doors opened with a grinding sound that spoke of overdue maintenance. Jensen guided the Wanderlust into its berth, noting how empty the usually bustling bay was. Something felt off. I sense disturbance, Nisha said, her Aurora eyes scanning the station. Many minds, all focused, all waiting. Jensen's hand moved to his blaster. Yeah, that's what I was afraid of. The airlock cycled open to reveal a woman with silver-streaked black hair and an expression that mixed relief and worry in equal measure. Zara Voss hadn't changed much, still wore the same battered flight jacket, still carried herself like someone ready for trouble. Jensen Rhodes, she said, crossing her arms. You've got some nerve showing up now. Missed you too, Zara. He stepped forward, then stopped. The tension in her posture wasn't just anger, it was warning. How bad is it? The syndicate's got people everywhere. They're offering more credits than most people see in a lifetime for information about. Her eyes flickered to Nisha. Well, about your friend there. Nisha's form shifted, the crystal plates of her body realigning defensively. You've been compromised. Half my staff turned out to be informants. Zara's voice was bitter. I've contained the situation for now, but it won't last. Whatever you're involved in, Jensen, it's bigger than anything we've dealt with before." "Show me," Jensen said. Zara led them through back corridors, avoiding the main thoroughfares. The station felt wrong. Too quiet, too still. Through maintenance hatches and service tunnels, they made their way to Zara's office, a cluttered room with screens showing every corner of the station. "Look," Zara said, bringing up security footage. 3 syndicate ships docked in the past week. They're not military. There's something worse. Research vessels. The screens showed labs being set up in abandoned sections of the station. Scientists in unmarked uniforms moved equipment that pulsed with an unsettling energy. "They're trying to replicate the experiments here," Nisha whispered, her core flickering with anger. "Using the station's isolation to hide their work." "That's not all," Zara said. She pulled up another screen, this one showing a woman in a sleek black uniform speaking to a group of station officials. Her presence seemed to bend the very air around her. "Director Raven," Nisha said. "She's already here." Jensen cursed under his breath. "Zara, you need to evacuate the station. Those experiments, they're not just dangerous. They're reality-breaking," Nisha finished. "The energy they're trying to synthesize will tear this place apart." Zara's expression hardened. "I can't just abandon the station. There are thousands of people here, people who came for sanctuary. Then we'll have to stop them before." Jensen began, but an alarm cut him off. Red emergency lights began flashing throughout the station. "Multiple hull breaches in Section 7, an automated voice announced. "Containment failure in Research Lab 3. All personnel evacuate immediately." The security feeds showed chaos erupting. A swirling vortex of energy had appeared in one of the syndicate labs, its edges crackling with the same aurora-like colors that flowed through Nisha's form. But this energy was wrong, unstable, violent. "It's starting," Nisha said. "Their attempts to synthesize our energy are creating rifts. The barriers between spaces are breaking down." Zara was already moving, hitting emergency protocols on her console. "I'm sealing off that section, but it won't hold for long." "We need to get to that lab," Nisha said. "I can stabilize the rift, but only temporarily. It will give people time to evacuate." Jensen grabbed her arm. "You'll be walking right into their hands. That's probably exactly what they want." Nisha's aurora eyes met his. Sometimes the right choice is also the hardest one. She turned to Zara. "Can you get us there?" Zara nodded, pulling up station schematics. "Maintenance tunnels will get you close. But Jensen's right, it's probably a trap." "Then we'll just have to spring it carefully," Jensen said, checking his blaster. "Got any of those old EMP charges we used to use?" A slight smile crossed Zora's face, always prepared for trouble. She opened a hidden panel in her desk, revealing an arsenal of non-standard equipment. "Just like old times." "Better hope not," Jensen replied, taking the charges. "Last time we did something like this, we ended up stranded on that moon for 3 weeks." The station shuddered again, the rift's power growing. Through the screens, they could see syndicate forces moving with purpose, not panic. This was all part of their plan. "They're using the chaos to mask their true objective," Nisha said. "Once the evacuation begins, they'll have cover to move in and take what they want." Jensen checked the charges Zora had given him. "Then I guess we better move fast." "Zara, can you?" "Already on it," she said, fingers flying across her console. "I'll coordinate the evacuation. Try to buy you time. Just," she looked at Jensen, "try not to blow up my station." "No promises," he said, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. They all knew what was at stake. As they headed for the maintenance tunnels, the station groaning around them, Jensen glanced at Nisha. Her crystalline form seemed to pulse with determination. "Ready to walk into an obvious trap?" he asked. "With you?" She gave him what might have been a smile. "I'm starting to think that's when we work best." Above them, Haven Station shuddered as reality itself began to tear. The endgame had begun, and somewhere in the chaos, Director Raven waited with a plan of her own. The maintenance tunnels of Haven Station thrummed with unstable energy, the metal walls warping from forces they were never meant to contain. Jensen and Nisha moved quickly, following Zora's directions through their comms while the station crumbled around them. "The rift's energy signature is getting stronger," Nisha said, her crystalline form pulsing in response to the chaos. "The Syndicate's experiments. They're not just failing, they're evolving." They emerged into Research Lab 3, and Jensen felt his breath catch. The rift hung in the center of the room like a tear in reality itself, its edges crackling with corrupted versions of Nisha's Aurora energy. But it wasn't just one rift anymore. Smaller tiers were spreading outward, each one threatening to spawn more. Magnificent, isn't it? Director Raven stepped from behind a bank of equipment, her black uniform seeming to absorb the light around her. The power to reshape reality itself, and all it took was understanding how your people's energy truly works. Syndicate guards emerged from the shadows, weapons trained on Jensen and Nisha. But Raven waved them down, her eyes fixed on Nisha's crystalline form. "You're killing everyone on this station," Jensen said, his hand tight on his concealed blaster. "These rifts aren't stable." "Stability is overrated," Raven replied. "Evolution requires chaos. Your friend here knows that better than most, don't you, Nisha? Why else would you break from your people's passive traditions?" Nisha's form shifted, energy coursing through her crystalline structure. "You don't understand what you're dealing with. Our energy isn't just power. It's part of the universe's fundamental balance. What you're doing isn't evolution, it's corruption." "Then help me perfect it," Raven said, stepping forward. "Your people could have shared their gift willingly. Instead, they chose to hide, to waste their potential. But you're different. You understand the need for action." The station shuddered violently. Through the lab's viewport, they could see evacuation ships launching into space, fleeing the expanding web of rifts. Zara's voice crackled over the comm. "Whatever you're planning, do it fast. The station's structural integrity is failing." Jensen's mind raced. The EMP charges were in place, but they needed Raven and her guards in the right position, and they needed to do something about that rift before it tore Haven apart. "You want to understand our energy." Nisha's voice carried a new tone, one of challenge. "Then watch closely." She raised her hands, and pure energy began to flow from her core. The rifts responded, their chaotic patterns shifting, drawn to her natural resonance. For a moment, the lab was filled with dancing lights as Nisha's power reached out to touch the tiers in space. Raven's eyes widened with hunger. "Yes. Show me how it works. Show me the true potential." The moment of distraction was all Jensen needed. He hit the detonator. The EMP charges exploded simultaneously, killing power to the lab's containment fields. In the same instant, Nisha's energy surged not toward the rifts, but into the Syndicate's experimental equipment. The machines overloaded, their artificial attempts at replicating Lumara energy backfiring spectacularly. Raven screamed in fury as her life's work began to collapse. The guards, their weapons disabled by the EMP, rushed forward with desperate hands. But Jensen was already moving, years of close-quarter combat training taking over. "Nisha now," he shouted, throwing the last EMP charge directly into the main rift. Nisha's power changed, no longer gentle but fierce. She poured her energy into the rift, not fighting it but guiding it. The tear in space began to fold in on itself, drawing in the smaller rifts like a collapsing star. "No!" Raven lunged for Nisha, but Jensen intercepted her. They grappled at the edge of the imploding rift, its power pulling at them both. "You can't stop this," Raven hissed. "The power exists. Others will find it. Use it." "Maybe," Jensen grunted, struggling to maintain his grip. "But not today." With a final surge of strength, he pushed. Raven stumbled backward, directly into the collapsing rift's event horizon. Her scream cut off as the tear in space consumed her, taking with it the corrupted energy she had worked so hard to create. Nisha's power flared one final time, sealing the rift with a thunderous boom that shook the entire station. Then, silence. "Zara," Jensen called into his comm, helping Nisha steady herself. "Status. Station's holding. Barely. Most people made it to the evacuation ships. But Jensen. Syndicate reinforcements are coming. A lot of them." Nisha touched his arm, her crystalline form dimmed from the energy expenditure but still determined. "The crystal veil. It's time." Jensen nodded. They ran for the Wanderlust, leaving behind the ruins of Haven Station and the remains of Raven's ambitions. As they prepared to jump to hyperspace, Jensen looked at Nisha. "Your people, they'll accept help now. After all this." Nisha's Aurora eyes met his. "They'll have to. The Syndicate won't stop just because we won today. We need allies. People willing to stand with us. People crazy enough to help, you mean?" "I can think of one," she said, and her crystalline features shifted into what was definitely a smile. The Wanderlust jumped to hyperspace, carrying with it hope for the Lumara's future. Behind them, Haven Station hung in space, damaged but surviving, much like its inhabitants, and somewhere in the void, the remnants of the Syndicate's research floated like a warning of what happens when power is sought without understanding its price. Jensen Rhodes had started this journey as a salvage pilot looking for spare parts. He was ending it as something else entirely. A defender of a dying species, an enemy of the Syndicate, and maybe, just maybe, exactly where he needed to be. "So," he said, setting course for the Crystal Veil, "what other impossible things are we going to do today?" Nisha's core pulsed with renewed energy. "With you, I'm beginning to think impossible is just the beginning."